School's out for the summer, but I'm already thinking about September. I know. It's probably because my son starts kindergarten this fall. And I keep thinking, by the time he finishes, what will school even be for? If a machine can write the essay, do the homework, pass the test, what are we actually teaching him to do? Here's what's changed this year. AI in the classroom stopped being a hypothetical. Nearly 3 in 4 young Canadians now use AI for their schoolwork. Just last year, it was 59%. Two-thirds say they're learning less because of it, and more than half worry they're cheating every time they use it. This year, the government finally responded. A national AI strategy, free AI training starting as early as kindergarten. Till now, teachers were mostly left to figure it out alone. Ban it and spend the year policing. Allow it and wonder what you're really grading. I went looking for someone who's trying to navigate it. I found Dr. Maggie McDonnell. She teaches professional writing at Concordia University, which means AI should be her worst nightmare. Instead, she's one of a handful of teachers who stopped fighting it and started rebuilding. She sat down with her students and they wrote the rules together. I'm Alia Adam. This is The Drift, how Canadians are navigating AI. Today, education. Maggie, welcome to The Drift.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
I'm curious, as you look back on the past year, was it different? Did something shift in your classrooms with AI becoming so much more accessible to students?
So, there have been a number of sort of shifts in different directions. I teach at Concordia in the professional writing program. So, students in my classes are there because they're already strong writers and they're looking to make a career out of it. So they want genuinely to get better as writers. So they're actually quite resistant to using AI tools because they feel like it's taking away from their own voice as writers. In my technical writing course, for instance, where I want students to be prepared to use AI because in the workplace, it's quite likely that they'll have to use it or at least to have access to it. I want them to learn how to use tools like that effectively and ethically. And I redesigned assessments to incorporate AI, and I've had to redesign the redesign to give the students that are fundamentally opposed to the use of AI a path forward without it.
So, how exactly did you redesign it? Can you give us some specific examples?
In the technical writing course, students work in groups over the course of the semester to create a user-friendly user manual. So that means that they have to know who their audience is. The initial redesign was I broke it up into 5 stages and said that they needed to use AI for 2 of those 5 stages and show me what they had done with the AI, and then reflect on whether or not they felt it, contributed to their work, that it was, more or less the same, or that in fact it distracted from their own work. And then in the redesign of the redesign, I had to have you can use it if you want, and here's how you might use it. And if you choose not to use it, here are resources that you could use instead.
And so, your approach was not to ban AI. Why did you take that route?
Well, a couple of reasons. First, because for me, I felt it would be a little bit hypocritical. I'm using AI myself, so why would I say you're not allowed to use it? Secondly, I think that for writers and other creators, while I absolutely understand the concerns about AI, at the same time, it is a tool, much like my word processing program is a tool. Or if I were, if I'm doing my taxes, my calculator is a tool because it's been a long time since I had to do all of my math on paper. Um, and so I think if we're looking at it as a tool as opposed to a path to academic dishonesty, then it becomes about how do I use this tool effectively? And the other thing is that I don't want to feel like my classroom is a surveillance area where I'm, looking over your shoulder to make sure that you're doing everything correctly and that you're not using anything illegal. And, it's almost like a drug policy. If I absolutely ban everything, then all I have left to do is police whether or not you're doing it. But if I provide safe spaces and ethical guidelines and an open dialogue, then we can both feel better about what's happening.
Big picture.
Yeah.
How do you think AI is transforming Canadian education right now?
So I think there's a couple of things that are happening. What I'm seeing and what I'm talking about and writing about and living myself is that AI is ultimately just another upheaval in the system that we're all dealing with. We've all been through these shifts before. And there are two big things that come out of it for me. And the first is we all need to be talking to each other. That community of practice is how we get through everything. It's how we figured out how to teach online during the pandemic. And then the other thing that I'm seeing is people realizing that AI isn't necessarily the thing that is breaking education, but maybe what it's doing is revealing some of the cracks. So when it comes to things like assessment, if I'm assigning a 5-paragraph essay or an annotated bibliography or a case study, these are all the kinds of things that AI can do a incredible job of, especially at the undergraduate or college level or high school level for that matter. So is that assignment doing what it's meant to do? Right? If I'm assigning an essay, what am I asking students to really show me? What learning are they supposed to be demonstrating? And if I know that AI has removed the functionality of that assessment, can I find another way for them to show me? So most of the assessments that I'm doing with writing these days have more to do with process and less to do with product.
I like that. We're always so focused on the final paper, the final grade, not necessarily how we got there. So the government just released its AI strategy. They're promising to reach 1 million post secondary students and train more than, I think it's like 3,000 teachers. Do you think it'll help fill some of those cracks?
I think people are looking for that kind of framework, that kind of guardrail kind of thing, but I don't know that sort of a top-down approach is necessarily going to be that helpful. And I also find that, if we think about higher education in particular, we have to be really careful because in some professions, we need to be able to train students for a workplace that is an AI workplace. Right? So if we have a ban or we have you can use it this way, but not this way, then we're putting limitations in places where maybe those limitations are actually detrimental rather than safeguarding. Um, and so I've seen it in my own institution and in other institutions where I've looked at their AI policies. The trend seems to be institutionally to have an AI policy that is essentially it's your classroom, do what you want. And here are some, tips and tricks. Here's a syllabus statement that you can use if you are allowing AI. Here's one if you're not allowing AI. So, yes, we want the guidelines, but at the same time, a teacher like me who's comfortable using it and feels like having access to it is not going to undermine my students' learning, I want to know I can do that without the university or the college saying, no, no, that's not allowed. But on the other hand, my colleague who believes perfectly validly that AI is detrimental and it's a composition course and obviously they shouldn't have access to it. They need to have institutional backup too. So I don't know that there is ever going to be a one size fits all, we fixed it kind of policy. So I think that there needs to be flexibility built in.
My son is starting kindergarten this fall, and I keep asking myself, will he be going to the same school that I went to? Or is the classroom about to look fundamentally different? Like, will a university degree even matter in 10 years? Or are we educating people for a world that's about to change faster than any curriculum can even keep up with?
Yeah, and I think those are all, really valid parental and citizen-based concerns. If we're looking at a university program and thinking, well, is it even worth it? Then that institution is going to change things because they need people to keep coming to the university to sustain themselves. So I think, yes, absolutely, classrooms are going to change. Maybe not, it might not be that your son is going to go into grade 1 and have a robot teacher. But, maybe earlier access to tech, or maybe more conversations around not just how to use a program or how to use a piece of technology, but why and what is it doing. And I think that we might see a resurgence of things like, what does critical thinking look like? What does critical reading look like? Because people are concerned that if the bot is doing everything for you, what's happening in your brain and how do we access, the building of knowledge if bots are doing it all for us. So looking at other ways to have conversations and learning where we're really provoking those thought processes, presenting the challenges that where learning happens, and focusing more on how humans learn and worrying a little bit less about what is the bot doing for me.
Mm. Yeah, well, you mentioned critical thinking, and those are skills that we're going to have to teach early on, it seems, earlier than we are currently. What are some other important skills that a student needs to develop right now, not for the job market for today necessarily, but for whatever's coming?
Yeah. So, and I think again, this is another instance where AI is maybe the big thing, but it's not the only thing. So, I think about my own kids who are now at the post-secondary level, and when they were little, the big concern was, should they have a phone or not? And if they have a phone, how early do we give them a phone, and why do we give them a phone? And then it was, you know, all of their friends faking their birth dates so they could get onto Facebook because social media was the thing, right? And it's interesting in my students now in their early 20s, I see are less and less involved in social media because as a generation they seem to have clued into the detrimental mental health effects of social media. So I think that, yes, critical thinking, but self knowledge, metacognition, I think is going to be a big thing. So understanding, how do I learn best, and what are the kinds of things that sort of demotivate me or motivate me? That's the kind of learning that I think needs to happen earlier so that students can see, okay, sure, I know that AI is there, or whatever other tool, I know that it's there, but is it really going to help me as a learner? Right? So those metacognitive strategies, I think, are going to be important.
And do you think that the teaching profession is necessary for that? Or is it something that AI could replace entirely?
So I think that that human connection, I mean, I like to think as a human teacher that the human connection is fundamental to the profession. I think that one of the things that we do that AI cannot really replicate is model critical thinking, model disciplinary thinking, model learning. So if we are just at the front of the lecture hall for 2 hours talking from our notes, then yes, that's something that AI could do, and perhaps with a little more animation even. But doing the one-on-one discussions or the small group discussions, or, leading the group through a thought process. I mean, one of the things that I do when it comes to AI in my own courses is at the beginning of the semester, as a group, we collaborate on an AI policy for our class. So we have the conversation and I show them that, this is something I've been thinking about, but I don't have all of the answers. So can we, can we sort of give up that mantle of expertise and go through the thought processes with our students to model to them what it looks like to grapple with these problems instead of just getting an instant answer?
That makes sense. Yeah. So, what do you think AI still doesn't understand about teaching and education as a whole?
There's a couple of things that we need to remember about AI, and the first is that it's aggregate and it's backward facing, right? Even though it can replicate it, it can't really think on the spot. It can't improvise. It can't make stuff up. I mean, it makes stuff up all the time. It hallucinates, but it doesn't have that human capacity to sort of think forward. It's always looking back. So it's looking back at what already exists, what it has access to, and then coming up with what it thinks is the best, most logical answer to the question you've asked it. Instead of genuinely grappling with the problem and testing different scenarios, it goes to, okay, this is the number one hit. It's like doing a Google search and always going for the first thing that comes up. Um, and that also means that it perpetuates whatever biases are already out there. So if the landscape of the internet is predominantly Western, white, male, etc., then by default, those are the top hits. That's what AI is recreating for you too. So even though it is masquerading as a thought process, it really is just a regurgitation process, which is something that humans can do. We can show you the thought process. We can say, okay, sure, that might have been the case in this particular context. But if I look at this as a Canadian as opposed to an American, or I look at it as a woman as opposed to a man, or if I'm a person of color and I look at it as opposed to someone who is white or indigenous settler, etc., and I see things differently, therefore, I'm going to think through this process differently. I'm going to come to different conclusions, or I'm going to feel differently about the conclusions that I come to.
When these large language models like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini became more accessible to everybody, including students, was there a moment where you were like, oh no, what are we going to do about this? Like, especially writing. I mean, that's something that people were using it for right away. Respond to this email, write this essay.
Yes.
I mean, even just recently during finals this year, OpenAI literally handed students across Canada and the US free ChatGPT. And at such a stressful time, how are they even supposed to resist that temptation?
Well, it's really interesting that you say at such a stressful time because, I said before that one of the things about AI is that it hasn't necessarily broken education, but maybe revealed some of the cracks. And if we think about standard test scenarios or standard assessment tasks, probing at, what are they actually supposed to be showing us? Another thing that we need to sort of probe is why do students cheat? If they cheat, why do they cheat? And the first thing to keep in mind is that most of them don't, right? So most cases of plagiarism come out of students not really knowing how to use the resources that they've got or not knowing that they're supposed to, cite their sources and, even a paraphrase, etc. But more importantly, if it's the end of the semester and you have 4 exams to get ready for, and 2 of those exams are your program exams because you are a science student, but you have to also do your English exam because it's a required program thing, and English is not your best subject, and, you've been struggling with the course all semester, and then ChatGPT pops up and says, "Hey, I can do this for you." Your immediate response is gonna be, "Oh, thank goodness." It's gonna be relief. So it's not that I'm looking for a shortcut, and it's not that I want to cheat, it's that I don't want to fail. So can we take a look at some of those scenarios and ask ourselves, is this the best way to evaluate our students? And maybe it is, but can I make it easier for students to say, I don't need to cheat? Right? So you asked if there was a moment where I thought, "Oh, no." And absolutely, there was. And it has less to do with the professional writing courses and more to do with composition courses, because I also manage our suite of composition courses at Concordia. And those are courses for students who are quite frequently using English as a second or third language, who have not had to write in an academic context at this level, and who are taking these courses either because they want to improve their writing, but more often because it is a program requirement. They come from out of province or out of the country, and if they want to get a business degree or a science degree, they have to have a 3-credit English composition course. So it's not a course that they've chosen to take. It's not related to the kind of stuff that they're excited or interested in. And it's, they're taking your course because it happens to fit their schedule. So their motivation is already in the basement. If I then say, you have no access to outside resources and everything has to be done in class on paper and you have 75 minutes to write a good essay, the timer starts now, go, then your motivation is even more tanked. But if I say, okay, you have 2 weeks to write this and I totally trust you, go off and write it. Is their motivation any different when it comes to all of those other external factors? No, it's not. And so, yes, the AI becomes a way to deal with this thing that they don't really want to do anyway. So there's a real tension between making assessment a supported learning activity. So, universal design for learning means that we don't say, okay, everybody has to write a proctored exam and you have 2 hours and, because all you're really testing there is how well do you write exams, not how well did you learn the thing. Um, so if I can't see what they're doing, then I can't see whether or not they're not doing it, if you see what I mean. Um, so I either bring them all into the classroom and that disadvantages a bunch of students, or I let them do it outside of the classroom and run the risk that this handful is going to use AI. Or I have to redesign things altogether so that it doesn't matter if they're in the class or not in the class. And so this is where this redesign and assessment comes from. But that was a real okay, this is going to take work moment. Not necessarily the world is ending, but I need to build new bridges here.
Let's say you haven't been with that student all year and you don't know their writing style, and they come in and they give you these papers that are written by AI. How do you tell that it's not their voice?
Well, honestly, it's getting harder and harder. And it's I've been writing sort of blog style stuff for years and years. And my own writing, if you were to look at it and didn't know my own writing, you might think it was AI because I do things like use the M dashes and use things
So
like
do I as a
sentence
journalist. We
fragments.
always do M
Yeah,
dashes.
exactly. And sentence fragments for effect and all of those things. So it's getting harder and harder to see it. And the detection apps and software is, you know, tends to give you false positives, tends to disadvantage neurodivergent students, tends to disadvantage students that are writing in a second language, and is sort of a violation of privacy too, right? If I'm feeding everybody's paper into my AI and saying, you know, can you spot your own work? then then I'm feeding their work to the AI. So, in Quebec, we're not supposed to use detection software at all for privacy reasons. I think that for me, the biggest tell is not so much the M dash, writing for effect kind of thing, but the lack of specificity. So AI is really good at sort of churning out general, vague stuff, but doesn't have, here's how this affects me personally. It doesn't have that sort of approach to things. And one of the big changes that we made at Concordia um, was for the composition placement test, which helps us determine which level of composition is best for a given student. We changed the prompts for that, which used to be here's a short op-ed piece, write an essay in response, which is like, here's an AI gold mine, right? And changed it to a bank of 20 questions, and each student gets two randomly generated questions, and they choose between the two. And the questions are things like, what movie changed the way you see the world and why? Or tell me about, a favorite childhood memory and why it's so special to you. So really personal stuff, because that's the kind of stuff where, your chat GPT is not going to have a childhood memory it can reflect on. Right? We've had to make some major shifts. But, like I said before, we've shifted for different reasons before and lived to tell a tale.
Yeah, like you mentioned the pandemic, of course, and that was all at once, really. Everyone had to mobilize and work together and try to figure out a solution right away. And AI is moving fast. It's today what it is today is not necessarily what it is tomorrow. So
Yeah.
it's hard to keep up.
Yeah. Absolutely. You may have gathered already, I tend to be a fairly optimistic person and try to find the silver linings and things. What I'm seeing in my own classroom is that students don't necessarily want those shortcuts. You know, they've paid to be in this class and they want to come out of it being able to do the thing we said they're going to be able to do. And unless we're saying what we want you to do is figure out how to use AI, then that's not a learning objective. And so they want to have those moments of struggling with a problem or, drafting a thing and going back and revising it because they want to develop those skills. And at the same time, I also see more and more of them that are just ethically the values that they live by don't square with using AI.
You just called yourself an optimist. You found a solution that works for you and your students, but I imagine not everyone around you feels the same way. Are your colleagues worried about the future of the teaching profession?
Yes, absolutely. There are people that are worried about their profession as teachers. I work with people that teach translation. I work with people that teach creative writing. I work with people that teach coding. And yes, absolutely. They're worried about their profession. They're more worried about their students' professions. And one of the things that I keep reminding myself and reminding my students is when I was in university, which, was a long time ago, but not millions of years ago, I went through university with people who are now doing jobs that didn't exist then. You couldn't possibly have studied for them because, so one of my friends, for instance, is a narrative game designer. You couldn't have studied that in the mid-90s. You couldn't get a degree in that. And now you can, right? So we've made those shifts before and we will continue to do it. So I don't think we need to be worried about our profession in terms of will I still be able to make a living? I think we need to be looking at our profession in terms of how do we work together to come out the other side of this.
What about your students, like the ones who want to become better writers or even pursue writing as a profession? What does their profession even look like with AI in the picture?
Well, that is an excellent question. What will their profession look like? Because I think that the big tension that I see as where the threat of AI lies is those entry level positions. So students that are graduating with a BA in professional writing or creative writing or English lit or another humanities kind of discipline, and this is true, I think, for all of the disciplines. The students that are graduating with an undergraduate degree in computer science face the same kind of problem, that the entry level positions where you're doing things like generating basic code or writing basic copy, those are the kinds of things that AI tools are just getting better and better at. My husband is a programmer and analyst and has been writing code and fixing code and debugging code for over 30 years. So when he uses AI to produce code, he has that expertise where he can look at it and say, okay, yes, this will work, or no, it won't, and knows how to fix it, right? And the entry level programmer doesn't have that expertise yet. So if AI can do it, what is the role of that younger, more inexperienced person? And the same is true for writers. If AI can generate copy, then what is the role of the human writer? So part of what I'm looking at in my classes is exactly that. How can you get your foot in the door in a writing position by highlighting the fact that you're a human being, that you have the you don't have the writing expertise necessarily, but you have the being a human expertise that you can bring to it.
Right. So we've still got that going for us. The being human part. That's the edge, I guess. Well, thank you so much for this insightful conversation, Maggie. And I'm sure a lot of other teachers, educators, and students are having similar conversations and will find your points really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said before, that's what needs to happen. I think I said this even in our email exchange that really it all comes down to we need to be talking to each other. My approach to AI might not be your approach to AI, and that's fine. But we can't just shut each other down. So let's talk about it. Whether we're talking about education or society in general, I think it's something that ultimately we'll look back on and say, okay, well, this is how we got through that. This is how we navigated that bump. Some of us went over it, some of us went around it, some of us went through it, but we all got past it.
Thanks for listening to The Drift, How Canadians Are Navigating AI. If you or someone you know is doing something interesting with AI in their industry, I want to hear about it. Find me on Instagram at The Drift Canada. I'm Alia Adam. Bye for now.